Hello, my name is William Biersack from the Office of Digital Learning and Instructional Design Services at Mount St. Mary College. I'm joined today by Marie Sulit, Professor of English with the Division of Arts and Letters at the college, and also my colleague Chuck Lynch, also with the Digital Learning and Instructional Design Services Office. And today we're going to be discussing for you designing alternatives, designing alternatives to high-stakes assessments in web enhanced, hybrid, and fully online courses. We will be coming with many different experience levels and different perspectives. Marie being a full-time faculty member at the college, very entrenched in the humanities. Me and Chuck both being adjunct faculty members, also with experience in hybrid and online courses, and more focused on the STEM fields. Uh, we will have many perspectives to share, tips, best practices that maybe even you could incorporate into your teaching practice. So I guess like maybe just like to start with like the easiest thing. So like Marie, in your courses, what kind of assessment strategies do you use typically?
Thanks, Billy. I did want to make a point there, and before I share some things that I do, or a couple of points, is that, we have, and it's been emphasized, that we do have an obligation to assess student progress and align them with performance indicators, right, that are consistent. So, it's just to have everybody thinking about how you're assessing the students. Are you over assessing them? Are you under assessing them? With the understanding that students didn't come to college just to be assessed, right? They came to learn. So there are values that Billy and Chuck will get into to those high stakes assessments, but it's to have you all think, what are worthwhile assessments that optimize student learning and instructor teaching, right? Coming from the humanities, but particularly literature and English, think about what you do, and any of the tips that I offer, I will say, are about communication skills and particularly focusing on writing. Because one, you want them to show and demonstrate some sort of knowledge base, that they're getting the content in some way, right? But more often than not, what you also want to emphasize across, it's not just English or the purview of literature or college writing, is their critical literacy skills. You want them to know how to communicate, so speech, right? The written word and the spoken word, and somehow put together a presentation. You want to build up that sense of challenge too. They want to be challenged. They don't think they do, but they do.
Well, they
They're
certainly
in
don't want
college.
the alternative. I mean, that's
Right.
like, coming from someone with a background and also gifted education, like,
There
if
you
you're
go.
not challenging them, they're not going, if you can't differentiate your instruction, that they will be in that, hot, that hot spot, that sweet spot of being challenged just enough, they're not gonna advance. Yeah.
And to build on that too, giving them the opportunity to to go further with the material even. So those students that want to take it that step further can, and it's something even I offer like bonus points or extra credit on top of it for, like, that if the student wants to go the crazy long amount and show everything they know, cool. They can challenge themselves. There's the parameters.
Right. So
Yeah.
think in terms of thanks, like the
Yeah.
challenge of it, and that we can push them, but you
Mhm.
can also use low stakes assessments rather than
Mhm.
high stakes assessments to do so, and then build and develop their curiosity and engagement.
Exactly.
Right. These are all across all levels of all college students. So as far as low writing assignments, you may want to think about, or is a chunk of your course grade going to be devoted to writing assignments, various writing assignments, various lengths that are not that formal research paper, for example?
Mhm.
Or do you also want to think about a participation grade, right? If they're so low stakes that it could be comprised and built into an overall participation grade that includes how you use eClass, for example, in discussion forums, right, asynchronously. So the first thing that I do want to suggest is, the importance of rubrics. depending on how you place those low stakes assessments, if you're focusing in on writing, and I'm offering you 2 ideas, whether you want to chunk it to a writing assignment grade or participation overall, right? Rubrics make things clear and transparent. Billy and I have also talked about this as Chuck, and it also holds them accountable. They're not doing empty work.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, they know the standard which they need to keep up to. Like it makes also speaking to the clarity and transparency of the rubrics, but also I find like just as an instructor, it allows for in the grading process a very student-centered approach, because students know what the standard is leading in, and also as the instructor grading it, it allows for more objective grading, which could, like, depending on, like, the student's effort and their experience level, you could kind of tool the rubric in different ways, but because you have that objective grading scale, I say there's a difference between student-centered learning and person-centered learning. Like student-centered learning is you're leveraging the experience in favor of the student, that they're able to take ownership, agency in the experience, make it their own, and they really have a solid footing in the learning process. Person-centered learning kind of like, basically it's like, the classroom kind of becomes a popularity contest, and you're giving the student a little slack because you like them as a person. So having the rubric to keep you honest in your grading allows for more student-centered versus person-centered experiences. Yeah, so in my case, in my courses, I use rubrics both for clarity, transparency, accountability, but also for my sake, just for the ease of grading as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something too, is with the rubrics, you can build in some ambiguity too.
Mm-hmm.
So you're wanting them to get certain standpoints, but you're not exactly saying exactly what they should be. You have to hit these key clarifiers. So like in the lessons I do, I give the students the opportunity to just take from their life, because it's spreadsheets and databases. So, a lot of these people are doing a small business or just learning how to do certain things, and it's across all divisions that I've had in my course. But I let them, as long as they're meeting those clarifiers, they can use whatever concept they're using from life to make it actually, something relevant to their careers, which is important for the material to just, give it some more presence, to have a goal for it at the end. But they're able to take in some of the material they're using in their life or career or for another course, and using it that way to, um,
Absolutely,
to use that information.
yeah, I build in some ambiguity with my rubrics as well. And so one of my undergraduate courses is the presentation media course under the Division of Mathematics and IT. So particularly, like, one of the concepts that I try to instill, particularly in the early stages of the course, is concepts of design. So using appropriate fonts, colors, contrasts, and other, like, design and psychological principles that they can build in to, create a really strong presentation, regardless of the medium, whether it's PowerPoint or any of the many Web 2.0 tools available on the internet.
And bringing in those visual aesthetics can really bring in that STEAM part of it rather than just STEM too.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's also how I teach the course. Like,
Mhm.
making sure that the artistry around everything is like, and also some presentation skills, public speaking
Right.
imbued in it. But yeah, but to my point, as long as they're demonstrating that content that I want them to pick up, as long as they're demonstrating those design skills, they could do presentation on whatever topic they want. They could use any medium they want, as long as I'm seeing what so allowing that ambiguity allows a lot of element of student choice, a lot of allows them to spark their creativity, which allows for a much more compelling assignment as well.
I so appreciate that multimodal, because we know that learning preferences, learning styles are our preference, right? But yet it enhances their learning if they know what their learning style and their preference are, that they can cater to, the mode that works best for them. So visual, I try and hit on all the different, the visual, the tactile, the audio, depending in a class. So
That
for
kind of leads
sure.
me to one of my points too. Like, my thinking is, like, particularly because we, we've all been students at one point, and we've all seen the cases of, like, maybe, like, uh, all the assessments, formative and summative in a course, kind of go the one way. Like, one of the non-examples of low stakes assessment that I usually bring up is, think of a course, and 80% of the course grade hinges on just 2 assignments, 40% for just a midterm paper, and another 40% for the final paper. And so you got everything hinging on those 2 assignments, because basically if you tank those, you tank the entire course. Tank one of them and you could get a very poor grade. And so big rationale to avoid that is, like, A, it doesn't cater to all learners of all styles, because you're just focusing on one means of assessment. And also it really devastatingly increases the cognitive load of the task. Students are going to be so worked up over those assignments and trying to perform well that they won't be able to focus on the learning task itself, which is why I'm a bit of a proponent of having multiple and varied forms of assessment, both formative and summative. Like, some small stakes assessments in there, that whether they're graded or ungraded or what have you, but just having some experiences built in wherein students have time to check in on their learning and reflect before leading into the more higher stakes assignments. Like, for example, for my fully online course in the graduate education department, that's what I do. I mean, so it's a accelerated course too, bear in mind. So there's a lot of content to be packed into just short of 5 weeks. But yeah, like building in so some formative assessment with, like, some student conversations and quizzes, but then also building in some more creative assignments and balancing both individual and interpersonal experiences, to really captivate all the different multiple intelligences that students could use.
Perfect. I appreciate, like, the idea of entrance. I mean, you're thinking formative assessments, but something to hold them accountable, but also something that offers more reflection.
Yes.
And weekly discussion forums, what are called entrance and exit tickets. You can keep in mind word count, and then it's what's Billy and Chuck may know, like, there's what's not clear, what is clear,
Right.
what's sunny and or muddy, what's confusing. And these can be very short responses that would help you prepare as an instructor for the next class, right? Or have them think. And these are something that could be offered very quickly by the students. That could help with, again, a short writing assignment, or you could make it part of their participation. It's one of those hit or miss. They do it, they don't, you move on.
Yeah.
But I also like content oriented. You could make it more content oriented and weekly discussion questions. And they could come up with those questions, but you also can model for them what you would expect just to get at the content. So that would get at more summative, right? They've either got it or they don't. And that was something that made me, those are 2 things that can be done that wouldn't take too much time for the instructor to grade either. Right? And then you see how they're learning, what they're learning, and then they offer you that feedback, and you can tailor the next set of a class or 2 to address their concerns.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the quick things that you can do, even by just putting a quick rubric into any of the assignments or forums, and just go, and they see it too, and you just go click, click, boom, it's graded. You give a little response, it's, I still like using Poodle as my response. I think it brings me more humanity to an online course, but yeah.
Oh, I agree with that. I'm learning that part, that they need to hear your tone and assess it, even though I try and put it in my writing, even though it's my territory. There's no guarantee of what the student is actually hearing
Right.
and reading, right? And how
Right.
they're doing it.
So it takes away from that high stakes of like the anxiety for the student, hearing a teacher's voice
Mhm.
pleasantly tell them, oh, that's wonderful. That was a good part you made there. And speaking instead of typing might bring out more,
More of that.
Yeah,
more
just
of that.
any opportunities to build a little bit more of your presence is just a best practice in
Yeah.
online course design, regardless. And but yeah, also particularly also as a kind of a way to kind of keep up with the workload. Like if you are doing several low stakes assessments rather than a more higher stakes assessment, and some faculty have said that just recording your thoughts in feedback is a little bit more time efficient than you know typing passages for every student submission.
Mhm.
That's very true as someone who comments on papers, but it's so the speaking is actually quicker for sure. And you do
Oh, yeah.
have to think, somehow when I put fingers to the keyboard, figurative pen to paper, it still comes out more formal.
Right.
Hmm.
Even if I try and soften or gentle the tone in prose, there's still something about a more formal comment that or set of comments that still is very,
I particularly
Yeah.
like either in English, but also like in some of the education courses I teach too, because like the expectation we're holding to the students in their writing is, keep it under 5 grammatical or syntactical errors. Um, I try to keep myself to that standard too in my writing, like followed
Mhm.
by example,
Model.
but then
Mhm.
it becomes more formal. So recording it gets a little bit more personable.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it reduces especially with, if you're not doing the high stakes stuff, which we're obviously preaching, don't keep everything high stakes. Um, it allows you to build those smaller assignments to see that growth incrementally, and you're able to kind of go back and reflect with the student, hey, great, you've made progress from here to here. And even if you're verbally telling them, it's something that even in any of my reviews that I've had the last 3 times I've taught the same course, everybody has liked being able to hear and or see me, because it brings that, just you're not looking at a page.
Mhm.
And to wrap that around to not high stakes testing and such, you can put in there, you can use an assignment and have the students speak the response,
Right.
or use the Poodle video tool and have them present the response.
Mhm.
So there is those options in there that maybe a student is more comfortable with speaking to the point rather than writing a 3-page paper.
Mhm.
Yeah, which kind of speaks to my point about the multiple varied forms of
Hmm.
assessment rather than going, like, having the course be a one trick pony and only
Yeah.
hinging on one paper or what have you.
Yeah, you too. Your thoughts definitely get at another idea to break up a high stakes assessment into thinking, how would that look as a team-based project, no matter what the discipline? And there are parts where each student can hold themselves accountable, but then they're working in a group or a team to get that entire assignment done,
Mhm.
Hmm.
and so breaking it up, phasing it, showing, again, sharing your rubric and your guidelines, varying, how they speak with one another, but also how they speak and respond to you, whether they're on a Poodle or in a written response, or some sort of forum to offer feedback to one another, how they collaborate with one another, all of that gets at communication skills.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, all of it.
And communication is key.
But yeah, but also like just the multiple, like when I'm building out my courses, like that's what I'm targeting, the multiple intelligences. And I know that sometimes students just they learn more effectively in the social context. So like they need those group, like, even though group
Yeah.
scenarios can be scary to teach or to participate in, uh, um, just to facilitate them, but they're valuable. So it's worth muddling through.
It's
Even on the teacher side, it's so much easier just to speak the response sometimes, because then you're looking at it, you got 2-3 minutes of response, maybe 5 minutes max, but then you're not sitting there typing, you're just having a fluid thought. And it gives you that modality to be able to, you could sit there and speak it while you're watching a show on your, because it works on your phone. You could sit there and just have e-class open and and talk to responsive between commercials or something. if commercials still exist. They do, I know that, but it gives you that modality too, to be able to still use your voice in the classroom.
And for peers to offer feedback, because if you have
Mhm.
peers presenting, the way they offer feedback, even if they're multitasking, Chuck,
Mhm.
right? They're still engaging, right? They're
Yeah.
still choosing, and again, what our guidelines are for what qualifies, right?
Mhm.
Or what is effective feedback,
Right.
to their peers could get them reflecting more. Everybody has to contribute in some way within the team,
Mhm.
but the class is still accountable for, offering feedback to the team.
And even one of the things I do with the projects, my first project is very open-ended. They're able to see all the material and share, and they can work with each other if they want. But I put a forum in the class for each of my 4 projects. I think I'm now using 5, but it's a group forum for them just to discuss the project.
Mhm.
Just to go like, hey, I got stuck here, and be able to chat with each other. And then I give them extra credit for going in and actually taking that extra step. So it alleviates that panic of, oh my God, who can I talk to? It's not like I don't answer my emails, but if they'd rather come from a peer or some, in the course rather than just directly from me, the students have that ability to just go in and chat
Mhm.
and work it out that way as well.
Agreed, for sure.
Yeah.
Students talking with one another, can be quite effective. Like somehow I could be saying something and it's still somehow
Hmm.
not accessible, right? If I fall
Right.
into the jargon or, yeah, they may hear
Hmm.
academic jargon. And I say that as neutrally as possible, right? Each discipline has their jargon, their specialized language,
Hmm.
but if they're not getting it, a peer may help
Right.
illuminate that.
And I just like to keep things open. I like to use open-ended instead of like non-high stakes, because it gives the students the ability to just still show what they know and what they're learning, but not, I don't have one big project. They can basically miss a project and still get a 95 in the course if they got 100 on everything else. So I scaffold it very
Carefully.
carefully, very project-based, very, here's what you're learning here, here's how you can implement it, here's how you can take it into the real world. So I try and very streamline everything, and it's not possible with every topic, but um, it's good to have those small goals in the course.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, it's particularly in your case because you have multiple smaller projects,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So one thing I was thinking for faculty as a strategy for success with designing for low stakes assessments, um, because some of them are already probably going to be implementing some larger forms of assessment. So my strategy for them would be to break it up. So particularly if so for example, some of the classes that hinge on a large culminating project, one strategy for success would be to break it up, offer it in different phases throughout the course of the term. Um, Offer the one assignment as multiple discrete assignments in phases, and for the students, it gives a strong rationale because it gives them adequate opportunity to time manage throughout the length of the course rather than jam packing all of the project into the end. So, and to develop solid ideas in the development of the project as well. So that takes, one big high stakes assessment, even if it's project based, and makes it more low stakes for the students.
Seemingly, right?
Seemingly.
Manageable. Right. I mean, it is. It's like even if we take a high stakes assignment, just to mention the traditional research paper, no matter
Right.
what the discipline,
Mhm.
breaking it up into, parts of an annotated bibliography, a research proposal, these things will shift.
Mhm.
Peer review, peer feedback, instructor consultation, and then that draft, at least one draft prior to works on the communication and the writing skills, gets at lower stakes, chunked that build up to that higher
Exactly.
stake, right?
Yeah, and it decreases the cognitive load of the task because, they're not.
Right.
It's not all one big
A weekend writing a paper.
Right, exactly. Or an
80%.
overnight
Just
watching
got
writing.
flashbacks.
See,
Flashbacks. Like, yeah.
good to
Whew.
see how pedagogy has,
Yeah.
writing pedagogy has improved.
We've come
But
a
yeah, the
long way.
multimodal. Yeah.
Yeah. We've come a long way even in 10 years.
Yeah, but scaffolding the experience, like, it's going to create much more rich ideas among the students, and also it is going to just make it a little much more positive experience for everyone involved.
Right. It's progress for the
Exactly.
student to look at what they're learning along the way.
Exactly.
Free opportunity to reflect. And in the meantime, they're building rapport with one another and with you. And we're providing that support for them as well.
I agree.
Absolutely. We're not perfect, but we're learning too.
Yeah.
I mean, so speaking to a more obvious example of what I would like. So we talked about breaking up a culminating project into multiple phases to create multiple low stakes assessment rather than one big high. I mean, one more obvious example is, if you have the large 100 question exam, you could break it up into weekly quizzes.
Love that idea.
For the same reason, you're going to decrease the cognitive load of the task rather than having students sweat over fitting in 100 multiple choice questions and burning out over the course of 2 hours trying to get it all done. It's going to be much more relaxed. You're still assessing them on the same content. All the content's going to be covered, but it's just going to be more incremental, a little more spaced out, and students are it's going to be a little bit more palatable for the students, which kind of speaks to universal design for learning, because one of the big concepts in there is the chunking principle, breaking up, like so whether it's resources that students are taking in, or in this case assessments too, breaking it up will make it much more intellectually palatable.
Palatable, but it also goes in more deeply, right?
Exactly.
If you give it the time, these ideas time to cook, process, be absorbed and integrated, and it moves from the front to the back or the back to the front, however, it moves more deeply, and it's reinforced, right?
Yeah, if they have more brain power to actually think about the question content and the content in general, rather than having to spend all their brain power dealing and coping with anxiety around the large test.
Right.
It's going to sink in rather than having to cram the night before and then it's gone 2 hours later after the exam.
Right, and that's something that the low stakes testing, as opposed to that cram mentality. I mean, I remember high school taking big tests, and I mean, I'm still an educator, but I know I wouldn't be able to tell you, the scientific formulas and stuff that I used to know. But the lower stakes stuff it's meant for, like you said, Marie, to be able to take a bite of it, kind of, and just absorb it, let it cook, and I guess, yeah, wrong way I did that, but just let it simmer, and just let it just you absorb it. And being able to take those smaller steps, the students can hang on to that material rather than just panic cram and go through the material.
Right. I mean, they can memorize, they can cram, but you want the learning to stick, right? And stay.
And what happens a little bit in my course is I get a couple emails usually towards the end of the semester of, oh my God, when's the final? I'm like, you submitted it like yesterday. There's that was it. That was the last project. There's no final.
There's a final exam.
There's no final. Like, there's a final exam, but it's the same questions from the first 4 quizzes, and the last project is a reflection on the other 3 projects. So they're culminating, but they're able to go back and look at the material they've already done, and it's kind of quasi portfolio-esque. They're kind of taking what they've learned and presenting it in one of these different ways. So it's not like completely combining a portfolio type of deal, but they have the ability, if they want to go that route, or if they just want to expand on the topic that they really enjoyed. My goal is really for them to take something that they're going to use in a career or in life and just kind of make something out of the course that they'll take with them.
Exactly,
Exactly.
and that
Yeah.
resonates with me too. Like meaningful projects and reflecting on their work and creating an e-portfolio that they could use or use to craft a personal website that they can use as a
Right.
resume builder. Absolutely, and I agree with that. But it just occurs to me. So if we could be, just because we brought up the whole topic of the big final exam and what have you, it makes it so if you both don't mind me throwing out a concept that we could kind of debate about the whole concept about teaching to the test, because of course like we have classes in STEM and the humanities, but of course we also have some divisions that deal with professional certification. So for example, nursing, they have the NCLEX to study for. Education students have their certification test through New York State New York State Education Department to go through. For those those who went through high school, having all the social sciences and every teacher in the grade school coaching you how to pass the Regents exam. I mean,
If you're
teaching to
listening, the answer to the history one is cultural diffusion.
yes.
Not kidding. That's what one of my history teachers told me in high school. Somehow did, I don't even know, they were confused. It was
Yeah,
the answer.
yeah, but in a lot of those cases, you find that the course teaches to the test, and more often than not, how they're doing that is that basically they're creating a carbon copy of the test. Maybe, like, of course, not the same content, well, or not the exact same questions or what have you, but they're replicating the format to such an extent and in such frequency to kind of train the students into being able to take the test when it's for keeps, for when it's the actual high stakes environment. And it is one thing that I struggle with is whether that's an effective practice or not. I mean, I can think of the pros and the cons. As a positive, you're building testing stamina among the students if they're taking that high stakes test that they're eventually going to need to do for professional certification. It's going to build their stamina so they're not going to tire out, they're not going to burn out when they actually need to go through the experience for real. And in that actual certification test environment, the cognitive load of the task is reduced because they've already gone through the format, they've been through those paces before, they're already familiar with how it's going to run. So they're not going to be worried about that. They can just focus on the actual content of the assessment and not the assessment format itself. But then as a negative, so if you are so heavily teaching to the test and you're only doing that, so if you're only copying that one assessment again and again and again, and that's all you do for assessment, is that an effective practice, and is that are students learning effectively? If you're just, everything is just that one summative, or that many summative assessments that just copy that one high stakes environment. I know I debate on that because, of course, yes, on one hand, we want students to be able to perform and have the stamina to perform when it's for real. But on the other hand, I think there should be some sort of balance struck, because yes, okay, so show them the format, have them practice that. But I mean, you can also do that, and you could also emulate that format in low stakes environments, or you can blend the two. It's just,
I hear you, Billy. It takes a real, and as someone who actually, this was how I was reared. My entire education from primary was, to the test, but it was also
Right.
learning, right? So it's a real skill to be able, or a set of skills to be able to take the test. Right. And so students have to face their anxiety about the test taking and the time constrained, and showing everything, writing fast, at that time it was pen to paper, right? Handwriting was graded maybe, along with grammar. But so it's a real set of skills. But if you're trying to optimize student learning in your class, even with a series of low stakes and combination of high stakes manageable, they'll be okay for taking that test. I would venture to guess.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to rely on high stakes assessments and the hit or miss all the time,
Yeah,
right? But
that's
it's
my feeling as well. Yeah. Balance. The middle path,
balance,
yeah.
balance,
Supposed to
consistency.
bring balance to the force.
I
Sorry.
appreciate the Star Wars. No, I always
Thank
say that I feel a disturbance in the force.
you can't have me
We
on
have
a
to
call
we
or a
have to confront
conversation
the
without,
disturbance.
yeah.
So the point is, try low stakes assessment, multimodal assessments, varying assessments. Have fun with it, and the students will too.
Exactly. Yeah. And if there's any way that we can answer questions after this recording is ended, feel free to reach out to us via email or phone. Our contact information is on the staff directories. Yeah, and otherwise, I hope you take care, enjoy your classes, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.